fully in our remake era, and despite multiple complaints from audiences that people are tired of seeing remakes and sequels over and over, streaming platforms and studios don't seem to care, or they know something about us that we don't, that despite our protests, we will at least give them a chance, or we'll hate watch, which works out well for them one way or another. Hate watching still counts as engagement, and engagement is the only metric that really matters, to be honest. In that light, Robin Hood is almost the perfect test case for remake culture. He's public domain, instantly recognizable, and endlessly flexible, a hero who can be molded into whatever shape a generation wants to see in itself. A charming rogue, a tragic soldier, a social justice warrior, or even a pseudo superhero. Every few years, some studio decides that this will be the version that will finally modernize the myth, make him relevant again, or capture the magic that's supposedly been missing since the last adaptation flopped. The latest attempt is newly minted streaming platform MGM Plus, who somehow believe that a new Robin Hood series will tempt people to sign up for yet another streaming platform. The strange thing about Robin Hood is that despite his moral simplicity and populist appeal, most modern retellings fail to land. They either swing too far into spectacle, losing the folk story heart of it, or they become too self-serious to be fun. So why does Robin Hood keep being remade when several really don't pan out well? Hi, I'm Kayla, and if you're new here, I talk about period dramas, history, and historical fiction. And if you want my opinion, then the only adaptation worth its weight in gold coins is the animated Disney version. I have no idea how many times that I've seen that, but it really does have me in my feels about my childhood and the 90s and the eventual winning of good over evil and the heartfelt feeling of community. Despite my firm belief that there's really only one Robin Hood adaptation worth watching, and yes, I will die on that hill, I'm gonna walk through a few of the others, the good, the bad, and the utterly baffling. And yet, there's something about this moment that makes another attempt feel oddly fitting. Even if this new series ends up being cheesy and clumsy and cursed with questionable costume design choices, it might still strike the right nostalgic chord, the kind of campy sincerity we secretly love to hate. So first off, why do we keep returning to Sherwood Forest? What is so special about the folktale of Robin Hood? So briefly, if you don't know, Robin Hood is the legendary outlaw who stole from the rich and gave to the poor, a figure of rebellion and moral justice who, along with his band of merry men, defied corrupt sheriffs and greedy nobles from his hideout in Sherwood Forest. The earliest ballads date back to the 14th century, when Robin wasn't the noble archer we think of today, but a common yeoman, rough, violent, and defiantly working class. I've just realized I've never said the word yeoman out loud. Yeoman. Anyways, just know, I am a historian, I know what that is, but there are certain words that you've never just said out loud. And even if I sat here and played it 500 times, I probably would say it wrong again because that's the type of person that I am. So please don't come in the comments and be like, that's not how it's pronounced. I know. The legends are rooted in the English Midlands, particularly around Nottinghamshire and Yorkshire, where Sherwood Forest was once a vast royal hunting ground. In medieval England, forests like Sherwood weren't public spaces, but heavily regulated royal preserves, places where ordinary people could be fined, imprisoned, or even executed for hunting game or collecting firewood. The forest laws protected the king's deer rather than his subjects, and they became a symbol of class inequality and state control over common land. At the same time, England's feudal system kept peasants bound to the estates of wealthy landowners, with few rights and very little mobility. So outlaws like Robin Hood embodied a fantasy of freedom, a figure who could slip between the trees and live beyond the reach of authority and strike back at a system that criminalized survival itself really. Early poems and ballads mention places like Barnsdale and Kirklees and Nottingham, anchoring the myth in real landscapes of medieval England. The earliest written versions, such as A Jest of Robin Hood and Robin Hood and the Monk, were recorded between the late 14th and 15th centuries, circulating through oral storytelling and cheap printed ballads known as broadside ballads. These tales were meant for ordinary people, songs of defiance and wit shared in taverns and marketplaces. So why do we keep returning to Robin Hood? Over time, the legend evolved through centuries of retellings. In Tudor England, he became a loyal servant to the true king. In the Romantic era, a symbol of pastoral innocence and chivalric virtue. By the Victorian period, he had transformed into a national hero in widespread print. A safe, moralized version of rebellion that was more about moral virtues and national loyalty. Very Victorian modesty coded. Each retelling of Robin Hood has reflected the anxieties and ideals of its time. Medieval audiences saw him as a protest against feudal injustice, like I was saying, and post-war versions celebrated him as a populist hero, standing up to corrupt authority. And in the late 20th century, Robin became a fantasy of personal freedom, a charming rogue who fights for love and fairness in a world that's stacked against the little guy. In today's era of wealth inequality and a cost of living crisis, Robin Hood should feel more relevant than ever. Yet again, there's comfort in a world where good and evil are clearly drawn, where helping the vulnerable and standing up to the rich and exploitative isn't complicated by nuance or bureaucracy. It's a story that reminds us of the moral clarity that we crave in society, fairness and courage and community against the big bad guys. We may never know if Robin Hood was a real person. He probably wasn't. But perhaps that mystery is half the fun. So, adaptations of Robin Hood. Robin Hood might be the weirdest mixed bag of storytelling I've ever seen on screen. I feel like mostly because, unlike Shakespeare, where the stories have been told in like more classical ways in the Elizabethan era, and then off-the-wall adaptations and modern adaptations that we're used to his stories being retold in a million different ways, and yet we can still recognize the key storytelling elements that make it Shakespeare. Now, I know that Robin Hood doesn't have like one author, so there is the differences in that. But with Robin Hood, bar like one or two bad modern adaptations, for the most part, it's been more about bending the medieval Robin Hood to fit our modern sensibilities and not taking the story and making it modern, if that makes sense, which has made some really wackadoodle adaptations, I think. So there was Errol Flynn's dashing 1938 Technicolor film, which was very swashbuckler, charismatic, very classic hero. This red and green combo, honestly, iconic, no notes. The way he could so naturally jump out of a tree and then get all sassy in somebody's face, proof that you don't need crazy explosions and battle scenes when you've got charisma tempting you. If you have not seen this adaptation, then you need to go watch it, girl. Then there was the 1991 Prince of Thieves, Kevin Costner, Robin Hood, back when it was only acceptable for Americans to play British legends. And you know what? Honestly, I am not mad about this adaptation. You've got Alan Rickman as the Sheriff of Nottingham. Again, no notes. If I had been Marion in this adaptation, honestly, hard choice between the two. I don't know how the writers didn't make it a harder choice for Marion to have to choose between Alan Rickman and Robin Hood. But I know that there are plenty of Kevin Costner fans over the years, obviously. I think the problem is that I've been living in the UK for too long now. And so my natural inclination as a resident and married to a British man is to lean towards the Alan Rickman of it all. But, you know, I get 90s Kevin Costner, I guess. Morgan Freeman's casting felt progressive for the time as a Moor. His performance added warmth and wisdom to the story and showed people of color being included in this time in history. Was this adaptation melodramatic? Absolutely. But like that guy on TikTok says, it was the 90s. And I feel like it was able to capture that rare middle ground of, combining humor, a bit of cheesiness, and over romanticism, but also seriousness to the danger and swashbuckling that is hard to find in films today. To be honest, everything is so polarizing. Either films are super cheesy and very basic storytelling, or it's super edgy and dark and explosive, and not a lot of cinema stays between the lines, where people walk out with their heart rate raised a bit, but a fuzzy feeling in their chest and some moral quandaries to ponder on the way home. And films like Prince of Thieves did that well, I think. Then there was Men in Tights. And honestly, Robin Hood is the perfect kind of story that is rooted in life, but because it's a myth and it's become adventurous and swashbuckling, like we were saying before, makes for the perfect comedy to make fun of other films. Robin Hood is perfect for that kind of silliness because everyone already knows the story. We get the basics. So the filmmakers can just mess around with the characters, the tropes, and even the history a bit without losing us. It's basically a playground for jokes and slapstick and poking fun at cinema itself, and somehow it totally works. Carey Ewles, another word I've realized I've never said out loud, it's just been up here in the noggin, but I'm gonna hope that it's Carey Ewles, just embodies the perfect medieval fantasy hero. Swooshing, blonde hair, charming, witty, and smoldering, but also silly in a way that feels timeless. Honestly, I would have been happy if he would have made 10 more medievalish fantasy films like this in the 90s, and if he'd have kept wanting to do them, I would not have gotten tired of watching it. Instead of making some of these adaptations that I'm going to talk about now, I feel like we would have loved Princess Bride 2.0 with the same setting with different stories over and over again, and we would have been happy. And I know that actors don't want to be typecast, but we would have given anything, really, and we would not have gotten tired of it. You know what I mean? So Hollywood, you're messing up. You're messing up, okay? Russell Crowe's Robin Hood from 2010 should have just been renamed Gladiator in Sherwood Forest, in my opinion, just because the main point of it felt like it was about like the brutishness and fighting in war and being a strong man. Which sure, there's a sense of danger and adventure and fighting in Robin Hood, but it felt like this adaptation was trying to be like Kingdom of Heaven or something, with how massive the fight scenes were, which is not the point of Robin Hood. It focused on combat scenes and raiding and brutality as a spectacle instead of the sense of camaraderie that comes with small communities being helped by outliers who understand them. This was around the time films like Batman Begins and Clash of the Titans and Battleship were popular, but also things like quirky Sherlock Holmes and Scott Pilgrim versus the World. It feels like studios were trying super hard to make this Robin Hood a purely dark action film, but that really doesn't align with the character of Robin Hood. When you tell a story about everyday people standing up to corruption, darkness and brutality alone isn't enough. You need that warmth and humor and connection to make it resonate. I think had this film had a bit of color and fun in it, like the Sherlock Holmes series, but still kept some of the darkness and adventure, I think it would have been received way differently by audiences. Which leads me to ask, why on earth, if the 2010 movie had so many mixed reviews, that you'd then go out of your way to make an even more action-oriented, dark, explosive Robin Hood? I'm talking about the 2018 Taron Egerton adaptation. There were literal explosions out of nowhere for no reason other than just to be like, look, an explosion. It's a lot like Guy Ritchie's King Arthur, just making something muscular and testosterone-fueled isn't enough to draw people in. I don't know why they keep making these types of films. The bows and arrows looked almost futuristic, like props from a video game rather than medieval weapons. The lighting was dark and washed out. It gave everything a grim, muddy tone that sucked the energy out of the action, I think. And then there was these terrible leather jackets. They were like really shiny and totally out of place, I feel like. And it just made the whole thing feel really like it was trying too hard to be edgy and cool and dangerous or something, rather than it having a good story. The amount of things that this film was trying to be kills me. Like, what in the Hunger Games Pan Am is this? Oh, viewers want characters they care about and a story that feels meaningful, not just CGI battles trying to compete with the Avengers. Like, it's so obvious that is what they are trying to do with these Robin Hood adaptations, and nobody wants it. Like, nobody wants Avengers Robin Hood. When you strip away the soul of Robin Hood and focus on action alone, it's hard to get people excited to actually go to the theater, in my opinion. It is fine sometimes for some stories to be small, for the goals or the conflict or the hurdles of these characters to be smaller than taking over the whole of London or fighting in a massive battle, right? Like, leave the kingdom of heaven to the entire story of the Crusades, right? Because that is a big, huge story. And let Robin Hood be in frickin' Sherwood Forest, okay? Let the poor guy just stay in Sherwood Forest. That's what we want to see, okay? Sometimes I'm okay with a small story, right? Like, social media and people's attention spans are ruining everything. So quickly, I just wanted to go through some of the comments that were on the trailer for the 2018 Robin Hood, because they're pretty epic. So someone wrote, because King Arthur, Legend of the Sword was such a great success, this must be Liongate's hold my beer moment on who could lose more money. The cinematics, their costumes, and the action scenes look more appropriate for a superhero film. What I was saying. I'm even confused whether it's set in the medieval time, modern time, or an alternate universe where it's sort of mixed. It honestly doesn't even look like a Robin Hood film. Still waiting for that Disney Robin Hood sequel I have been waiting for my entire life. Same. Can Hollywood come up with something that isn't a reboot? This comment is from 7 years ago. 7 years ago. And it's only gotten worse, so yay. And the answer to that is, from the future, Favlaze, is that no, they can't. So finally, the BBC series, because I want to speculate why on earth they think this new series might have more of a chance to be a successful series than this one did. The BBC's Robin Hood series from 2006 to 2009 had a lot of fans because it was fast-paced and fun and full of youthful energy. Surprise, surprise, people like something if you inject a bit of fun and color in it. Oh my god. Richard Armitage, iconic behavior. Like, look at these black locks. Look at what more do you need from a show? Okay? Do you see how many buckles? Do you see how many? Do you know how long it would take him to unbuckle all of it? That is a lot of buckles. Are you not entertained? What more do you need in a show? Okay? If you don't understand how amazing it is to have it 3 seasons of Robin Hood with Richard Armitage, then you do not understand me as an internet friend, okay? Anyways, the series leaned into adventure and camaraderie and a bit of romance, and even though it occasionally flirted with like playful exaggeration, it stayed mostly grounded and really leaned into some of that playfulness that people enjoy from Robin Hood. People liked it for its charm and swashbuckling spirit. It was canceled after 3 seasons due to rising production costs and inconsistent storylines and the challenge of keeping such a well-known story fresh over multiple episodes. I think that's what's going to be so tricky about a Robin Hood series as opposed to a film. Robin Hood is tricky as a television series. Audiences already know the basic plot, so it's hard to sustain tension and character growth for more than a handful of seasons without it feeling repetitive, which is why I'm struggling to see how this new show is gonna be a multi-season success. Look, this doesn't look amazing. The costumes are a bit lackluster. I love Sean Bean, loads, but they keep shoving him in medieval stuff because of Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings, hoping it'll stick, and it does feel like an obvious choice to me. This is what happens when the majority of your actors come from one area, and you've got like 2 Yorkshiremen to choose from with this level of star power. Before I moved to the UK and I knew how things were pronounced, I used to pronounce his name Sean Bean, okay? I literally thought his name was Sean Bean. So I feel like that's an improvement on my pronunciation. Don't you? So I love the title and subtitle of this article. Sean Bean gifts us the most gloriously bad TV offering of the year. It ticks every box you could wish for in your oldie worldy trash. Sean Bean as the Sheriff of Nottingham, fairy smut, and not a bad wig in sight. Hurrah! I do think there are a few reasons that even if this series is objectively bad or cheesy or whatever, it might just have come at the right time. From what we've seen so far, MGM seems to be leaning fully into nostalgia as a way to set this series apart. The production favors a lighter, more colorful aesthetic, the dark greens and the light blues that lean into like A Knight's Tale, the 90s vibe rather than the gritty realism of Crowe or Edgerton's films, which immediately gives it a sense of fun and accessibility to a new young audience. By focusing on the ensemble, Robin, Marion, Little John, Friar Tuck, and others, the show has a chance to explore relationships and camaraderie in a way that could be kept fresh rather than just relying on Robin as like a lone wolf, a lone hero in the woods by himself. And honestly, hot take, but I think we've come to expect too much from television, and what ends up happening is the pressure for shows not to fail or for them to keep our attention in a clickbait scrolling world been them making explosions where there doesn't need to be any, and sex and superhero style storytelling for historical stories that nobody really wanted in the first place. There was a time when people were happy with dozens and dozens of seasons of Murder, She Wrote, and it didn't have to reinvent the wheel or be something it wasn't or be too dark or edgy for people to tune in every week. There was this show that Jordan and I really got into a couple years ago from the 90s called Cadfael, and if you've never heard of it, it's about a monk in the 12th century who solves murder mysteries. Cadfael stars Derek Jacobi, period drama legend, and there's nothing flashy or showy or explosive about this series. It's got this like warm, cozy, medieval vibe to it. It's set in the countryside in Shrewsbury. Cadfael had his own little adorable herb barn where he would mix potions and he'd dole out wisdom to wayward teens and star-crossed lovers in trouble whilst keeping a keen eye on the danger that could be afoot. It is such a shame, but I feel like this show could not be made today because it's too slow, I think. But that style of like earnest storytelling and trying to focus more on the characters and the setting than jump scares or shocking plot twists is why these types of shows were popular back in the day. And I do think people are begging for that type of television again. Cadfael is proof that you need nothing more than really good actors in frocks for people like me and my husband years later to look past the graininess and the set designs and the weird music and still think it's really fun to watch. We don't need any of the explosions for people to watch good storytelling years and years later. And perhaps that's why they keep trying to make Robin Hood. Robin Hood offers a story that's instantly recognizable, it's flexible and endlessly malleable. A hero who can be serious and cheeky and dark or romantic depending on the era. Studios love it because it's public domain. Anyone can adapt it without paying for rights, and it combines recognizable myth with built-in action potential and a romantic subplot, making it seem like a relatively safe investment. But the sheer number of adaptations has created fatigue, and each new version feels pressured to justify itself with a new gimmick. In this way, Robin Hood has become a perfect example of Hollywood's ongoing identity crisis, caught between nostalgia and originality, trying to convince audiences that each new iteration is both familiar and new. Do we need another adaptation? No. Honestly, I'd rather see a new period drama I've never seen before instead of remakes over and over again. But what I will say, based on my first look at this, is that at least it's not trying to reinvent the wheel, and that actually might be a part of its success. The lush greens, the golden light, it the natural landscapes, suggests a deliberate move towards escapism and warmth, appealing to audiences who want adventure with some heart in it, you know? This retro medieval vibe lines up perfectly with the current rise of medieval core and a broader 90s nostalgia wave in pop culture, I think. It's clearly trying to tap into that like comfort food feeling of a story like Robin Hood, while reminding us that Robin Hood is as much about cleverness and loyalty and morality as he is about archery and sword fights and bravery, right? Look, there's definitely a risk that this new series could flop. Nostalgia is great, but audiences these days also want a story with emotional or thematic weight. People know way too much about the mechanics of storytelling and the entertainment industry for there to be no criticisms if the script is bad. Harking back to 90s nostalgia can be a win for new audiences, but that era's self-deprecating, like cheeky humor, the kind that you see in Shrek or A Knight's Tale, also has to be cleverly written for today's viewers to feel the same spark and charm. If it leans too hard on the look and feel without updating what Robin Hood actually means, it could end up feeling hollow. To be honest, the stealing from the rich to give to the poor, it sounds nice, but without nuance, it might come off as a bit flat to modern audiences. Plus, it could get tonally messy, you know, trying to please both diehard fantasy fans and viewers who want irony or realism. On top of that, we've had so many reboots of these kinds of stories, so King Arthur and the Musketeers and Peter Pan, that people are starting to get a little tired of revived legends. I'm kind of optimistic though. This MGM series could hit that sweet spot of mythic warmth, reminding us that sometimes a simple, hopeful story is exactly what we're craving. The outlaw in the forest, fighting corruption with a band of misfits, feels timeless. Yet every generation is always fighting against their own sheriff of Nottingham. This new series might not reinvent Robin Hood, but if it can remind audiences why the story mattered in the first place, you know, community, fairness, resistance, and love, then maybe it'll earn its place in the forest of adaptations. Well, that is it for me, guys. Will you be watching this new adaptation? Do you think that MGM Plus is worth it for this? I don't know. Please put some of your favorite medievalish, nostalgic recommendations below. I would love some new suggestions. I'm really bad to watch primarily like Regency or Victorian period dramas. Mainly that's because that's a lot of what they're making over time with period dramas. So anyways, I love some like of Robin Hood-ish vibes, suggestions, and also I forget to say this a lot on the channel, but please do like, subscribe, or comment if you can, because it helps for the channel to grow and also for me to be able to tell what period dramas that people would like us to talk about here on the channel, or anything new in historical fiction. So if you can interact with the channel in some way, it really does help me to know what people are wanting in terms of chats about new period dramas coming out. Bye!